Ontario Liberals are gathering near Toronto this weekend to pick a new leader. The party was defeated decisively, you may remember, by Doug Ford's Progressive Conservatives in 2018, losing 46 seats and also losing official party status. 6 candidates have been campaigning for nearly a year, but one has emerged as the clear front-runner. The CBC's Mike Crawley is at the convention, and he joins us with more. So, Mike, give us the lay of the land. There are about 2,500 delegates, I understand, were up for grabs in this convention. How's it all shaken out?
Yeah, Catherine, this is one of those rare delegated conventions that we love to cover because it's great for television. It's got all that drama, but unfortunately, it doesn't seem like there's all that much drama to this one. Steven Del Duca, a former transportation minister in Kathleen Wynne's Ontario Liberal government, is the clear front runner. He's got basically half of all of the elected delegates already sewn up. The only real question is he going to take it on the first ballot, or is it going to take more than one? I had a chance to interview Steven Del Duca earlier this afternoon and asked him what's the message he's going to be delivering to the delegates here when he does his speech tomorrow.
The message is mostly about the fact that we need to focus on delivering progress in some critically important areas: public education, public health care, the fight against the climate crisis, building economic dignity, expanding opportunity, all of the traditional themes that our party has stood for since I got involved in politics when I was only 15 years of age.
Are you going to mention Doug Ford in your speech?
I am going to mention Doug Ford in my speech, yes. How so? Well, I think there's a very important contrast for Ontario Liberals and for everybody in this province who does believe in progress to draw against the performance of Doug Ford.
Now, I'll mention the other candidates. 2 of them are sitting MPPs, Michael Coteau and Mitzi Hunter. They were also cabinet ministers in the Wynne government. And there's 3 other candidates who actually haven't held elected office anywhere. That's Brenda Hollingsworth, Alvin Tedjo, and Kate Graham.
But do they get followed around by entourages waving signs? That's the real question. Listen, for whoever wins, Mike, what is the size of the task ahead for the Ontario Liberals?
Yeah, you can't overstate it, Catherine. Look, that result for the Ontario Liberals, it was the worst election result in the party's history. And so they are literally rebuilding from the ground up. And they've got basically 2 years to do it. So they got to come up with a whole full slate of candidates. They need to develop their policies. They've got to rebuild the constituency associations. They got to fundraise like crazy. I mean, Doug Ford last night held one fundraising dinner and raised over $2 million. The Liberals in Ontario last year in total raised less than $1 million. So they're really disadvantaged on the fundraising side of things. But I think coming out of this convention, you're going to start to see the Liberals try to craft something in the way of a message that says why Ontarians who want to get Doug Ford out of office should choose them rather than the official opposition New Democrats. And I think the sense I'm getting from Steven Del Duca, as you mentioned in that clip there, is that he's going to be pitching them as a progressive party and probably trying to do that classic Liberal technique of campaigning to the left to try to draw away some of those NDP votes rather than having vote splitting.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that context. Mike, the CBC's Mike Crawley at the Ontario Liberal Convention. It's been nearly 2 years since Kathleen Wynne stepped down as leader of the Ontario Liberal Party. Now, the Grits were decimated by Doug Ford's Tories in 2018, dropping from 55 to just 7 seats. But ongoing labor disputes and unpopular moves by the Ford government on issues from autism funding to license plates have led to a rise in the polls for the third party in Queen's Park. And with the next election 2 years off, party faithful are gathering this weekend to pick a new leader to lead them into battle. So is the outcome a foregone conclusion? Let's go live to the convention floor. We've got Dan Moulton with Crestview Strategies and Jamal Abbas, a political analyst from Manitoba, in our CBC Bureau in Toronto, Amanda Alvaro of Pomp and Circumstance, and Tim Murphy, Managing Director of Macmillan Vantage. Before we get down to business, I do want to just ask all 4 of you, none of you, we should be clear to our audience, is supporting any candidate in this race. Is that correct?
That's correct.
That's okay, excellent. Thanks very much. Okay, Dan, I'm going to start with you. Listen, journalists, we love excitement, we love drama, we love a good competition. You got none of that for us, as I understand it, right? Is there any sense of anticipation on the floor of the convention right now? Steven Del Duca, right?
Look, this is
Yeah, obviously, I think it's a pretty foregone conclusion that Steven Del Duca is going to win here on the first ballot. It'll be announced tomorrow morning. I will say there is a fair amount of energy here. We've got more than 2,600 delegates that are showing up to this convention. This is a huge convention hall. We've got a lot of energy. They're just about to open the doors. There is a lot of excitement, but you're absolutely right. It is a foregone conclusion that as long as all of the delegates show up to vote on this first ballot, it looks like Steven Del Duca is going to win tomorrow morning.
Okay. Jamal, I want to ask you, you're a Liberal, but from outside the province, and you're from a province where the Liberals have spent a lot of their time in the provincial wilderness in Manitoba. What perspective do you think you can lend to this convention, this collection of Ontario Liberals?
Well, I was really involved with the Manitoba Liberals from 2013 to 2016, and we had we put in a valiant effort for rebuilding the party. There were a lot of things that should have been done differently, but one of the big things that my takeaway is unity post-leadership election, and that's so crucial. Mr. Del Duca likely will become the next leader of the Ontario Liberals, but my take on it is that after that's done, the real work comes to uniting all those camps. There's a lot of different ideas brought to the table from the leadership candidates. Bringing all those ideas together and keeping a cohesive team, I think, is the most crucial step taken after this convention wraps up.
Okay, Tim, I want to bring you in. It's not clear that in this particular instance, unity is so much the issue. One thing, though, that I did see some of the candidates talking about, because they seem to generally be in a level of, I would say, violent agreement on a few things. But some candidates have said they didn't think this should be a coronation, and it sure sounds like it's going to be. Is there something that can be lost when a party basically is in such a level of agreement about a new leader?
Well, there is that potential, but I think we're okay, because I think there is, as noted, I think there was like 2,200 prepaid delegates. We're probably going to get to a number that is very close to the number that registered for the last time when we were electing a premier. So I'm actually not worried about that, because I think there is an enthusiasm. I think you're seeing some new talent come to the table, which is always exciting. Stephen is an experienced hand, spent a long time in the legislature, was a cabinet minister, and he understands the importance of bringing the party together. I mean, there's some important things the party's got to do. We got to raise some money. We got to rebuild the ridings and be ready for an election in 2.5 years. The good news is against a premier who seems to be struggling to keep his head above water in the polling.
Yeah, Amanda, I want to ask you about that, and also about how Steven Del Duca positions himself. We had CBC Queen's Park reporter Mike Crawley on a little bit earlier. He was talking about how he expected Steven Del Duca to really position himself as a progressive. I think I saw on Twitter a little bit earlier that they're expecting some attacks, though, from the NDP, suggesting that, in fact, Steven Del Duca is too right-wing. He leans too far to the right. What do you think about how the Ontario Liberal Party should be positioning itself if it hopes to take a run at Doug Ford?
Well, it's interesting. If you take a look at this leadership race, which may have lost sort of like the dark horse candidate that rises to the occasion or the thrill of the convention, what it may have lacked in that vibrancy, it certainly made up for in what we were all describing as kind of unity. And the good thing about that is when you're lacking that kind of drama in the race, it does allow for the party to come together a little more. And the last thing this Liberal Party needed coming out of this and about to take on Doug Ford in the next election is more fractures. If you look at the Conservative leadership race federally, it's all about the backstabs and the knives that are out. And this was very, very different. And I think for all the right reasons, because Steven Del Duca will come out with some progressive policies and some very experienced policies. He'll also be a person who I think can start tackling some of the other issues, organization issues, thinking about what candidates to bring to the table. 124 of them, in fact, need to be considered. And probably most importantly, and well, maybe a little boring, fundraising. Dollars need to happen, and it needs to happen fast. And hopefully some of his experience can allow the party to move really quickly after a really long, it's been many, many, many months since the last election without a leader.
Yeah, Dan, I want to bring you in. I think we should talk more about fundraising, but I think what I really want to ask about is what happened in the last election. Voters obviously punished the Ontario Liberals, and I wonder, how does a party redeem itself? Is it enough to say, like, listen, we got our rear ends kicked and we've changed? How do you win back Ontario voters?
Yeah, look, what I think went wrong in 2018 is instead of trying to run and win the confidence of Ontarians back, we tried to run and win a majority government, and I think that was the wrong strategy. We've got 2 years now until the next election. The new leader is going to have to focus very hard on certainly rebuilding the party, certainly doing a lot of fundraising, but I think most importantly earning back the trust of Ontarians and demonstrating that we have a platform as Liberals that speaks to the core values of what people care about in this province. And I think if you look at what's going on with Doug Ford and his government right now, in 2 years, I think this election is going to be about young parents in this province, predominantly in the 905, that are worried about the health care of their parents, and they're worried about stability in the schools for their kids. And so if Steven Del Duca's got one job on his hand in the next few years, I think it's going to be earning the trust of Ontarians that he's up to the job on delivering on those two things.
Tim, I want to bring you in on that fundraising question that we didn't quite get to. Talk to me about, again, I'm going to refer to the very good analysis from Mike Crawley a little bit earlier, pointing out that I think just last night, Doug Ford, in the past few days in any case, raised quite a lot of money, I believe he said $2 million at one particular event. That is far shy of what's happening with the Liberals right now. What needs to happen to fatten up the purse?
Well, the good news is we're fixing one of the big problems that we have, which is we're getting a leader, because that is fundamentally it's driven out of the sense that the party has a leader, has a direction, and has an end goal, which obviously is the next election. So we are, by picking a leader over this week, and I think kickstarting the first part of it, I think any leader is going to know that, we're going to raise money. And the good news is, there are going to be a bunch of people who have been around the party for a long time who were kind of waiting for this point to say, okay, what's our direction? How do we help, point us and shoot? And so, I'm hopeful for that. I think the party came out of the election, last election, in decent shape. From a campaign perspective, we actually started to turn off the taps before the election date because we frankly kind of knew the outcome was coming. And I think, the riding subsidies have continued for, through to 2022, I think, so that's helpful. So I think the expectation is the party should be able to get into the next election in decent enough financial shape to run a campaign competitive across the province with Doug Ford. And so, yes, they're doing well from a fundraising perspective, but I expect us to be rebuilding in that regard very soon.
Okay, well, so the party this weekend and then the work continues. I'm not quite sure which, but thank you all for your time. Amanda Alvaro, Tim Murphy, Dan Moulton, and Jamal Abbas.
Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video.